facing the police every single day.
Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the path to liberty. I'm Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the Fast Friday edition of the show for July 21st, 2023. And today I've got an overview or an introduction to one of the top ways the surveillance state has been tracking you and building profiles on you. You're probably familiar with the tool that I'm going to get to in just a moment, but now they're also using AI in conjunction with it as kind of a pre-crime tool to predict who might be someone committing a crime. And you can't, well, it's not hard to imagine how bad that could be. This is something called ALPRs, or Automated License Plate Readers. Here's how Electronic Frontier Foundation describes it at EFF.org. I'm going to link to this article, plus everything else that I'm citing in this episode. I'll publish a blog post after the live stream is done here in a couple of hours over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path2liberty, so you can read it all in detail, because there's a lot more information than I'm going to cover here today. So ALPRs, they write, are high-speed, computer-controlled camera systems that are typically mounted on street poles, street lights, highway overpasses, mobile trailers, or attached to police squad cars. They automatically capture all license plate numbers that come into view, along with the location, date, and time. The data, which includes photographs of the vehicle and sometimes its driver and passengers, is then uploaded to a central server. A lot to unpack there, but if you think about tying this in, we're just going to talk about the license plate tracking and the cameras that they use it for and how they're using it and how much they're using it. But if you think about using it in conjunction with facial recognition, it's possible that they not only just know where a vehicle is or everywhere it goes and then upload it to a database that whether they keep it just for 10 days or 30 days or 5 years or permanently, it gets shared with everyone. And it's not just kept localized and used to target just people who are suspects of a crime. But going forward, and with the facial recognition, being able to see who else is in the vehicle is a whole nother thing. So EFF tells us there's two types. There's stationary and mobile. And if you're looking on the screen, on the video here, I've got an image of an example of a stationary one. And they say these are installed in a fixed location, such as a traffic light. You sometimes may think they're red light cameras. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a combo. They're also on telephone poles, the entrance of a facility, a freeway exit ramp. They generally capture only vehicles in motion that pass within view. If multiple stationary ALPR cameras are installed along a single thoroughfare, the data can reveal what direction and what speed a car is traveling. If the data are stored over time, they can reveal every time a particular plate has passed a given location, allowing the government to infer that the driver likely lives or works close by or, well, does other activities close by. Here's an image of a mobile one. It's hard to tell which one's which, but I'm pointing to the one here with my cursor here. They attach these usually on police vehicles along with the lights. So if you're just passing by and you're not familiar with what it is, it may be like an extreme light situation, but they point in all directions. And they say these are often attached to police patrol cars. I've also seen them on large kind of industrial type, basically tripods that can wheel around parking lots and things like that. So they're partly stationary, but they're easy to move. So they're generally attached to police patrol cars, allowing law enforcement officers to capture data from license plates as they drive around the city throughout their shifts. In addition to capturing images of passing vehicles, mobile ALPR cameras are effective at capturing license plates of parked cars. For example, a patrol car may drive around a public parking lot capturing hundreds of vehicles' plates in minutes. Or, as I'll mention later in the show here, they actually, in some areas, they're just gridding entire neighborhoods. Now, here from a DOJ report, Department of Justice report in 2012, they point out that ALPR technology was invented in 1976 in the Police Scientific Development Branch, PDSB, Home Office, United Kingdom. The European Secure Vehicle Alliance notes that, quote, the Provisional Irish Republican Army, the IRA, terrorist bombings in the city of London resulted in the establishment of the Ring of Steel in 1993, a surveillance and security cordon using initially CCTV cameras, but they also used ALPRs. License plate readers really, in an essence, are a wartime surveillance measure, and they're using it everywhere. But I just wanted to point that out. This whole document is very interesting. And now some people say, oh, how many of these can they collect? But as of 2012 in this DOJ report, they say that ALPR systems are able to capture, get this, up to 1,800 plates per minute at speeds up to 120 to 160 miles an hour. Now, we don't ever get to go that fast here in Southern California, maybe rarely, but it doesn't really happen. But in other words, they can collect a lot of information. These are incredibly fast. Systems range in cost from $10,000 to $22,000, depending on the manufacturer and the specific configuration, and agencies have often been able to fund acquisition through federal grant funding sources. Why would the federal government be handing out money for localities to have automated license plate readers? Of course, it's just to keep you safe on the highways, or maybe was there some other thing that they were doing? We learned, now, speaking of these federal grants, ALPRs basically got on our radar around 2015 or so because of a report or some leaked information that had been pointing out that the DEA had been running an automated license plate tracking program for at least at that point 8 years without ever notifying anybody. Now, the federal government only had a few dozen of these, and what they were doing is they were relying on localities to feed the data to them through, well, again, fusion centers and eventually information sharing environment, ISE, which is post 9/11 thing. So let me read this from the Wall Street Journal. The Justice Department, this is back in 2015, the Justice Department has been building a national database to track in real time the movement of vehicles around the U.S., a secret domestic intelligence gathering program that scans and stores hundreds of millions of records, and that's tiny compared to what they're doing now, about motorists, according to current and former officials and government documents. Now, again, that was already for around 8 years, maybe it was 10 years at that point, all without a warrant, without public notice of the policy, basically keeping you under surveillance and building these profiles on you where you go for the crime of driving. Again, from the Wall Street Journal, the documents show that the DEA also uses, here's another way that the war on drugs has been a war on the Constitution and the war on your liberty all on. They use it as an excuse. And people who are okay with government doing this kind of stuff are okay with them, well, they're setting the stage for them to do it on other things, right? To keep and bear arms and other stuff. Anyways, the documents show that the DEA also uses license plate readers operated by state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies to feed into its own network and create a far-reaching, constantly updating database of electronic eyes, scanning traffic on the roads to steer police towards suspects. Yeah, of course, they're just going to get criminals, is what they always tell us. Mind you, most of the criminal law that exists shouldn't exist in the first place, but as of 2011, the feds, the DEA, only had about 100 cameras feeding into the database, and that number has exploded since. So 100 in 2011, mind you, then they start sending out federal grant funds, war on crime, whatever they may be doing. We've even seen some pandemic-related funding used for police state and anti-terrorism, and then they use those tools against you. That number has gone way up. And I think primarily the number of cameras feeding it come from the state and local level. But again, they're funded by the feds, and then they're all just working as a team, one giant blob of, well, hating liberty. Here from the EFF, this was a partnership they did with Muckrack, a report back in 2016 or 2017. Maybe it came out a little bit after that. We have released records obtained from 200 agencies. So they submitted a bunch of FOIA requests over a period of 2 years, and they got 200 agencies that provided them data, 200 for the whole country. And that accounted for more than 2.5 billion license plate scans in the years 2016 and 2017. So by 2016, 2017, 200 agencies had at least volunteered this information, and we know they had 2.5 billion scans where they're feeding this data into central databases. Even if they're not keeping it on a local level, once it gets shared, some other locality might keep it, or a federal agency, DEA, FBI, ATF, a bunch of other really bad guys. The data is collected regardless of whether the vehicle or its owner or driver are suspected of being involved in a crime. In fact, the information shows that, get this, 99.5% of the license plates scanned were not under suspicion at the time the vehicle plates were collected. So 0.5%. They have to collect 2.5 billion of these, and that means they've been doing a warrantless search on billions of driving habits, drivers, just for the sake of maybe telling us they'll catch one or two people or a handful of people. And people go along with this, and that's really the problem. On average, agencies, they say, are sharing data with a minimum of 160 other agencies through, and this was the main company at the time, a Vigilant Solutions Learn system. There are a couple of other companies doing this now as well, though many agencies are sharing data with over 800 separate entities. And here from Joe Cadillac's blog over on Substack, there's a lot of privacy-related stuff. They point out that the three major companies, there's DRN, there's Vigilant Solutions, and I think Recor is the other big one too. They now, as of 2019, so we had those 2 years of 2.5 billion. Now they have this 3-company database that's sharing and partnering with law enforcement agencies, state, federal, and local. They have created a mind-boggling database of 14 billion license plate scans that allows law enforcement to track anyone in real time. Here from EFF, this is regarding, I think, in California. No, this is still, in 2019 alone, just 82 agencies, and I think this is just in California. They did another report, a follow-up on this. 82 agencies throughout California collected 1 billion license plate scans using ALPR. So again, the number keeps expanding. It was 200 agencies over a 2-year period for 2.5 billion. Then 2019 in one state, 82 agencies getting 1 billion. And of course, they're sharing all this information. And of course, they're building profiles on you. And we know, well, what are ways that, let's say the government says you have to stay home. You want to leave your phone so they can't track you. Well, they're going to track you through your license plate as well. So 82 agencies in 2019 collected more than 1 billion license plate scans. Yet 99.9% of this surveillance data was not actively related to an investigation when it was collected. Part of the reason for the War for Independence, part of the American Revolution, was about opposition to general warrants. Warrants that are not based upon probable cause, specifically describing the person, place, or thing to be searched or seized. Now they're just doing blanket searches and tracking everybody, again, keeping the profile on people as well. Nevertheless, they write, law enforcement agencies stockpile this data, often for years, and often share the data with hundreds of agencies around the country. This means that law enforcement agencies have built massive databases that document our travel patterns, regardless of whether we're under suspicion or not. With a few keystrokes, a police officer can generate a list of places a vehicle has been seen with few safeguards and little oversight. On average, this is a report by, who did this one? This was by Mike Meharry that we published a few years ago. He said, on average, agencies share this data with a minimum of 160 other agencies, and again, in some cases, as many as 800. Now, in 2020, Mike went through this kind of Blue Leaks series of documents, and he found that the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, this is the fusion center in Northern California. There's like 70 to 80 of these around the country. Again, these are surveillance centers that are partnerships of data sharing between state, federal, and local. They're partly funded by the states and the feds. It's just nasty stuff. That's good for another episode. He found, going through those documents, that they had their own ALPR policy, which proves that fusion centers serve as surveillance collection and dissemination units, hubs, effectively providing a framework for an integrated national surveillance network. It also surprisingly reveals that fusion centers actively participate in the surveillance by providing the technology to local law enforcement agencies. And this goes right back to that other report where they're saying years ago, oh, well, they're just doing their federal grant funding. Well, why would they do that? Because they don't have the ability to go around and be open about, well, we're installing a surveillance camera to keep track of who goes to this gun shop or this church or this protest or whatever it may be. We don't want to be able to just be obvious about that. So instead, we're doing, well, red light cameras and speed traps and things like that. But we're also collecting all the data on everybody all the time. And they're being put not just in big cities, but everywhere. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And here, this also is from the California report. Actually, maybe the other one that EFF was not just California, but they had a 2019 report. I'm getting some of this information confused here. This is the 2021 report that was just covering California agencies, where they got 63 agencies that provided them data from 2018 through 2019. And they collected a combined average of 840 million plate images each year. And only 0.5%, not even a single percent, matched data that was on a hot list. And they basically have these hot lists of vehicles that they're actively looking for. For example, maybe one that was stolen or suspected of being committed to a crime. And it would make sense to say, okay, well, you can target somebody who is the suspect of a crime, but to target everybody because one crime has been committed is the excuse that they're using. That's the general warrant. That's the problem right there. They're also using these to grid entire neighborhoods. The Arizona Mirror a couple of years ago describes it this way. Part of the training for ALPR systems, Chandler police officers are taught to grid neighborhoods during their downtime, systematically drive up and down every street in the area, indiscriminately scooping up information on vehicles, just building bigger profiles, uploading that information through the Fusion Center, and then, of course, they know where everybody is all the time. Gridding entire neighborhoods allows Big Brother to form a detailed and highly accurate pattern of everyone's driving habits day and night, 24/7. And here's a report, a really interesting report from Forbes, just I think it was on Monday this week, showing how AI is now being used in conjunction with ALPRs to flag people based on their driving patterns. Now, of course, this one, so the title, it says, this AI watches millions of cars daily and tells cops if you're driving like a criminal. Now, of course, they provide a, quote, success story where someone had been driving to the wrong area on a regular basis, staying for a short amount of time, and the AI determined that this was the type of behavior that most people who have been picked up or arrested in that area for being a drug dealer, this is the kind of the pattern that they went through. And so, therefore, this car got flagged, and they made a routine stop, and they found that, well, he was a drug dealer, so they busted him. But just because they have a success doing something like that, now, mind you, we're not going to get into the discussion about the unconstitutionality of the war on drugs, but just because they provide a success story doesn't mean that a lot of other people are going to be caught up in this kind of a dragnet. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure out how someone who wants to use this in a bad way are going to be able to flag behavior patterns and then just start, well, basically stalking people. Here's PlateSmart. This is one of the companies that provides this AI tool. And they point out that their product can help law enforcement, quote, identify vehicle behaviors that could be precursors to a crime or a terrorist attack. It's not even just a precursor. It might be a precursor. So it's so many steps removed from actually catching someone or having probable cause of criminal activity. And I think this is an extremely dangerous situation that we're facing, and it's only getting worse and worse and worse. So hopefully this information is helpful. Hopefully it was interesting and educational, and I really appreciate you being here. If you want to help us get this kind of information out to more people, nothing helps us get that job done more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope to see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.